Let's bring in City University of New York law professor and attorney Jeff Lax. Jeff, thank you for being here. This is great, colorful information that we're getting from on the ground. I want you to take me inside the mind of a lawyer on this. The jury debated, they deliberated for about 10 hours over the course of 2 days. That seems like nothing, given, the year of speculation that's gone into this. What does that indicate to you as a lawyer?
Yeah, well, the conventional wisdom is that a shorter deliberation tends to indicate a conviction, but I really hate to speculate on any conviction. And keep in mind that in other high-profile cases, specifically O.J. Simpson, the jury deliberated for only 4 hours and they acquitted him. So I hate to speculate. The one thing I will say about it is that the one piece of data is kind of foreboding, and that is that when juries first get together, the first vote they take, which is basically their initial impression right after the trial ended, that tends to be the final vote 90% of the time. So whatever this jury's initial vote was after the closing arguments, once they got their instructions, I would tend to think because they didn't deliberate that long, I would lean towards whatever that initial impression was.
Are you saying that that means that, okay, you take an initial vote, 10 of the 12 feel a certain way, that the usual fashion is that those two outstanding jurors come around to the majority? Because you talked about O.J., you listen to some of those jurors, they were split going in there, as was the nation. But when some realized, okay, we have intransigence on the part of one or two people, we're just going to come around to them. So who ends up winning out?
Yeah, just what you said. The foreman usually will take that initial vote, not always, but that's a very common practice to take an initial vote just to get a sense of where everyone in the room is. And that, again, it's not always, it's not a hard and fast rule, obviously. And in complicated trials, and I actually don't consider this to be a complex trial, but in complicated trials, the jury may have a lot of questions for the judge, especially about the law, and there could be jurors who get swayed one way or the other. But 90% of the time, the data does show that that initial count usually ends up being the final result. So like you said, those two, outliers usually do end up coming over when there is a verdict, assuming there's no hung jury.
Hey, Jeff, it's Jay Struberg in Chicago. I just want your overall impressions of the way this trial has played out. We've heard weeks of testimony from, at times emotional eyewitnesses. We heard from use of force experts, medical experts, and even fellow officers coming out against Derek Chauvin's actions. Do you think the prosecution made a compelling case, and how do you think the defense handled their side?
I do think the prosecution made a very compelling case. As Jamal really did a great job, by the way, explaining the law, the standard was relatively low. This is not a first-degree murder case. And as Mr. Andrus explained so well, all they have to prove for second-degree murder here, and another term for second-degree murder is felony murder, is that Mr. Chauvin was trying to commit a felony when he killed the victim. And that's all the prosecution has to do, is show that Mr. Chauvin tried to commit a felony against against Mr. Floyd, not necessarily that he meant to kill him. So, that it did make a compelling case that, the 9 minutes, with his knee, that image, was played for the jury, and you saw how dramatic that was and how bothersome that was. So that's something that I thought was very compelling. And I do have to say also that the defense did all that they could. I think they had a tough case, but I think they put questions in the mind, like, did the pre-existing conditions, like the heart condition and possibly narcotics, have an impact? They did what they could with what they had.
Jeff, when you say that it has to be proven, or at least it has to be proven in the minds of these jurors, that Derek Chauvin tried to intentionally commit a felony against George Floyd, what would the felony be in this case? Would it be assault? Would it be reckless disregard for his health when he saw him go unconscious and didn't render CPR? What is the felony here?
Yeah, the felony would be the assault. That would be the standard in this case with what everyone saw on the video. It would be an assault.
I see. So it simply has to be, I guess that takes some discretion in the minds of the jurors, then, that they would see this as an assault rather than him using an appropriate use of force as a reasonable officer would, as his defense attorney tried to claim yesterday.
Right. That's the standard. Did he use a reasonable amount of force? Yep.
Okay. CUNY law professor Jeff Lax, thank you so much for joining us here, Jeff.